Hello everybody, happy Valentine's Day. Hope everyone is doing well. I want to thank John for sending me this information from the Houston Chronicle. That's Houston, Texas. This was disturbing. We've been speaking out against Watchtower and their child abuse problem, and this is about the Southern Baptist Church, and I'll get into it in just a minute. But, John made a good point. Why isn't the media reporting, this on Jehovah's Witnesses and their problem? Their child abuse problem and their policies and stuff like that. That's why we keep asking these things. You never hear it on the news about, the problem Watchtower is having within their organization. So I'm going to just hit a few highlights here in this article. Published February 10th, 2019. First of 3 parts. So they're going to do 3 parts. And I'm going to put the link to this down below. Okay, to the article. First of 3 parts. 35 years later, Debbie Vasquez's voice trembled as she described her trauma to a group of Southern Baptist leaders. And if they're anything like Watchtower, we know it's not going to do any good to talk to the leaders. They're just going to say, "We will never change a 2-witness rule." Okay, back to the article. She was 14, she said, when she was first molested by her pastor in Sanger, a tiny prairie town an hour north of Dallas. It was the first of many assaults Vasquez said destroyed her teenage years, and at 18 left her pregnant by the Southern Baptist pastor, a married man more than a dozen years older. Disturbing. In June 2008, she paid her way to Indianapolis, where she and others asked leaders of the Southern Baptist Convention and its 47,000 churches to track sexual predators and take action against congregations that harbored or concealed abusers. And that's what the abuse survivors, same thing they want, who have been abused by those in Watchtower. Understandable. These victims have the right to do this. Vasquez, by then in her 40s, implored them to consider prevention policies like those adopted by faiths that include the Catholic Church. Now we know the Catholic Church has been under fire. Jehovah's Witnesses are talking about them and, bashing them and saying how horrible they are. But yet, still, they don't even know about what's going on in their organization. Back to the article. "Listen to what God has to say," she said, according to audio of the meeting which she recorded. "All that evil needs is for good to do nothing." And that's a famous quote. "Please help me and others that will be hurt." And that's the same thing all of us have been saying about Watchtower and their policies. All we want is you to protect the children, report these child abuse cases, let the authorities take care of this. Days later, Southern Baptist leaders rejected nearly every proposed reform. Sound familiar? The abusers haven't stopped. They've hurt hundreds more. In the decade since Vasquez appealed for help, more than 250 people who worked or volunteered in Southern Baptist churches have been charged with sex crimes. That's 250 too many. An investigation by the Houston Chronicle and the San Antonio Express News reveals it's not just a recent problem. In all, since 1998, roughly 380 Southern Baptist Church leaders and volunteers have faced allegations of sexual misconduct, the newspapers found. That includes those who were convicted, credibly accused, and successfully sued, and those who confessed or resigned. More of them worked in Texas than in any other state. Left behind, more than 700 victims, many of them shunned by their churches, left to themselves to rebuild their lives. Some were urged to forgive their abusers or to get abortions. disturbing. About 220 offenders have been convicted or took plea deals, and dozens of cases are pending. They were pastors, ministers, youth pastors, Sunday school teachers, deacons, and church volunteers. Nearly 100 are still held in prison, stretching from Sacramento County, California to Hillsborough County, Florida. State and federal records show. Scores of others cut deals and served no time. More than 100 are registered sex offenders. Some still work in Southern Baptist churches today. I wonder how many of their congregation members know that. Journalists in the two newsrooms spent more than 6 months reviewing thousands of pages of court, prison, and police records and conducting hundreds of interviews. They built a database of former leaders in Southern Baptist churches who have been convicted of sex crimes. And then they go into details about their investigation. So like I said, I'm going to put the link down below to this. And thanks again, John. And I'm going to say goodbye, but then I am going to play a video that was on the news from the Houston Chronicle. You have a great week.
Childhood sex abuse is the absolute destruction of innocence. Tearing a young soul and forcing it to realize the world is much darker than they believe.
You're 7 years old. So do you know the parts on your body that no one is supposed to look at or touch? Has anyone ever touched you? Who touched you?
Mr. Livingston.
Okay. Who is Mr. Livingston?
My church man.
Your church man?
You can always say, well, I'm an oak, you know, I can take that, I can resist that, and so forth, you know. But they will climb up in your lap and they'll go to sleep. It doesn't matter how much of spirituality that we have, or that I have, or any other minister have, but we're still human flesh. Flesh will do what flesh will do.
That's the thing about sex offenders. They thrive on trust. It's more common for these things to happen to someone close to home, family member, minister, someone that you're going to trust, and they work their way into a position of trust so that they can take advantage.
In some Baptist churches, some pastors behind closed doors, they would refuse to, you know, to discuss as such, which I don't think that would be right. Because as the Bible tells us that what is done in the dark will eventually always come to the light.
For a student, a lot of times students will say, well, that's what Christ looks like. Because God had done such an amazing work in the ministry that we were a part of, I kind of felt like, you know what, God, maybe it's time that I do something for me. It's very important churches and anybody has boundaries and guidelines. And our church did. I just chose to ignore them. But it is definitely important to have a set of boundaries. Accountability is a huge thing. You know, that has to be overseen by the leadership of the church, without a doubt.
All I did was touch, you know, and that was it. She wasn't going to tell anybody. She wasn't going to, so forth, you know. I'm the one that told the detective. Stupid me. It didn't matter that I had brought 400 or 500 people to a saving faith, or that I worked in the church for so many years, that I went through three churches and never had any complaints, no problems at all. But in this one community, in 2007, you know, things began to go wrong. And I just feel like I was a victim. Is that fair?
How many times has Mr. Livingston touched your private?
Every single time he comes.
So where are you when you, like, as you said that you sit on his lap? Where are you when you sit on his lap?
On his knee.
Where though? Like, where are you?